Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're stepping back in time to unpack the dramatic life of a man who faced, well, genuinely impossible odds. We're looking at King Hezekiah. This is a ruler who inherited absolute chaos and then had to stare down the absolute greatest military machine of his era. So let's dive right in and explore his profound victories and, as you'll see, his surprising failures. Think about this for a second. How do you actually lead a nation when the most powerful empire on earth surrounds your city walls? I mean, imagine standing on a wall, looking out, and seeing nothing but a literal ocean of enemy soldiers who are promising absolute annihilation. Today's explainer explores this agonizing space between unwavering faith and total destruction. Section 1. Rebuilding a Broken Kingdom. Okay, let's dive into this. To really understand Hezekiah, we have to start in the dark. Taking the throne at just 25 years old, he inherited a total nightmare. Just compare his reign to his father, King Ahaz. Ahaz literally nailed the temple doors shut and sacrificed his own children. It was incredibly bleak. So, what was Hezekiah's response? He swung those doors wide open. He destroyed the idols. He even crushed the bronze serpent of Moses because it had become an idol. Basically, he brought a sledgehammer to his father's wicked legacy. And get this, it took exactly 16 days. Just think about the staggering scale of that cleanup. For 16 straight days, the Levites hauled years and years of pagan defilement out of the temple just to burn it in the Kidron Valley. This wasn't a quick dusting, you know? It was an exhausting, intensely physical purge to save a rotting sanctuary. Section 2. The Great Assyrian Threat. Let's move to and see how this builds, because just as Hezekiah gets his nation on its feet, a massive shadow falls over the Middle East. The Assyrian Empire begins systematically wiping out neighboring kingdoms. In his 4th year, they besiege Samaria. By year 6, the 10 northern tribes are erased from history, which sent terrifying refugees pouring south with just horrific stories. And by year 14, this creeping threat arrives right at Hezekiah's doorstep with terrifying brutality. Now, Hezekiah knew he was next, and his preparations were absolutely audacious. To make sure Jerusalem survived, he had teams of diggers carve a 1,750-foot tunnel straight through solid rock. They started from opposite ends and literally met in the middle. I mean, it was an insane engineering feat for the time. They channeled the Gihon Springs straight into the city. The plan was simple: Jerusalem would drink and Assyria would thirst. But, preparation only goes so far against an empire. In sheer desperation, Hezekiah tries to just buy them off, paying this exorbitant ransom of silver and gold. And the real tragedy here, he literally had to strip the gold off the very temple doors he had just restored to pay it. He essentially tore apart his own revival. And the absolute worst part? The Assyrians took the money and then marched on Jerusalem anyway. So much for ancient diplomacy, right? Suddenly, the enemy is at the gates, and they don't even start with arrows. They start with psychological warfare. The Assyrian commander, the Rabshakeh, stands outside the walls and shouts this taunt. And he doesn't use the diplomatic language of Aramaic. No, he shouts in Hebrew, making sure every terrified citizen on the wall can understand exactly what he's saying. He mocks their military. He mocks their allies. He even uses their faith as a weapon, claiming the Lord told Assyria to destroy them, and asking how their God could possibly save them when literally all the other gods had failed. The taunts are just echoing off the stone walls. The citizens are forced to listen to these promises of death. But contrast the Rabshakeh's shouting with this singular, highly restrained command from King Hezekiah: do not answer him. It creates this incredibly tense mini-narrative of silence under pressure. The people stood on the wall and just held their tongues in the face of sheer terror. After that, Sennacherib sends a letter directly to Hezekiah, repeating every single threat, writing down that Hezekiah's God will fail him. So what does the king do? He doesn't call his generals. He doesn't hold some big war council. Instead, he tears his robes, puts on sackcloth, walks straight into the temple, unrolls the letter, and physically spreads it open before the Lord. He just lays the crushing news right there on the floor and prays. And God actually answers through the prophet Isaiah, promising that Sennacherib will not enter the city. He won't shoot a single arrow, and he won't build a siege ramp. That very night, the impossible happens. 185,000. That is the jaw-dropping number of Assyrian soldiers who died overnight in their camp by the angel of the Lord. There was no battle, there was no siege ramp. When the sun rose, 185,000 soldiers were just dead. and Sennacherib fled in total disgrace. Section 3. A miraculous recovery. Now, you'd think the story ends with a massive celebration, right? But right after the city is saved, Hezekiah falls deathly ill with a boil. He's told by the prophet Isaiah that he needs to put his house in order because he is going to die. So Hezekiah turns to the wall and just weeps. He prays, God hears him, promises 15 more years of life, and then offers this mind-bending cosmic sign to confirm it. The sun's shadow actually reverses its course, retreating 10 steps backward. Incredible. Section 4. The prideful mistake. News of this cosmic sign actually catches the attention of a rising Eastern power, Babylon. They send envoys over. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the profound shift we see in Hezekiah's character. During the siege, he wore sackcloth and relied completely on God. But during this peacetime visit, God steps back to test his heart, and Hezekiah completely fails. He proudly shows off his silver, his gold, his armory, basically showing off all of it as though it was his own personal achievement. When Isaiah confronts him and delivers this devastating prophecy that Babylon will one day conquer them and take his descendants away, Hezekiah's response is incredibly strange. He simply accepts it. He takes this selfish comfort in the fact that this massive national disaster just wouldn't happen during his own lifetime. Section 5. Lessons from King Hezekiah. Let's break the fourth wall of history for a moment here. This isn't just an ancient timeline, it speaks directly to our modern lives. Lesson 1 is heart over performance. Remember earlier in his reign, Hezekiah welcomed people from the north to a Passover feast who hadn't purified themselves properly. Instead of turning them away, he prayed for them. You see, God honors a willing heart over perfect rule following. If you ever feel too messy to approach him, just remember this moment. Lesson 2 is the power of silence. Remember the citizens on the wall listening to the enemy commander completely mock their faith and their king? They didn't yell back. They held their peace. Apply that to our world today. In an era where every single social media provocation, every insult, and every attack seems to demand an immediate reaction, there's immense strength in knowing when to simply stay silent and not engage. Lesson 3. Face the impossible. When the Assyrian king sent that terrifying letter, Hezekiah didn't form a committee to strategize a PR response. No, he unrolled it right in front of God. When you receive crushing news, maybe a medical diagnosis or a financial collapse, you don't need to have the perfect strategy or exactly the right words. You can simply take that anxiety and lay it wide open before God exactly as it is. Lesson 4. Beware of pride after victory. Hezekiah passed the test of the siege with flying colors, but he utterly failed the test of the treasure room. When God stepped back, Hezekiah took all the credit. So the crucial point is that the absolute hardest test often comes right after a massive win, when the storm has passed and we suddenly forget who actually carried us through it. I want to leave you with this final, provocative question today. When the impossible is overcome and the victory is finally yours, will you remember who actually won the battle? Do we only rely on faith when the walls are closing in on us, or can we maintain that humility when the sun is shining? Think about that as you go through your week. Thanks for joining me on The Explainer.